All right, today we're talking about al-awrad. Al-awrad. He says al-awrad arba'ah. So the situation of awrah or awrat, this is the gem or the plural for the word awrah. And you know awrah is the part of the body that needs to be concealed or covered. It's the part of the body that needs to be concealed or covered. Right? Um, or they a lot of times, the way in which they express this, they say they use this word on the part that is a part of an individual's body that is not permissible for, um, in general, it's not permissible to be seen except for certain individuals. All right. A lot of this you all already know, but like I always say, it's good to get the notes down. Make sure you have all your notes down because by now, I'm sure people are asking you all about a lot of these things. And when you go back in your notes, you need to remember sometimes to explain certain things that are tied to these issues that may not be in the book itself. Okay? So he says, al-awrat arba'un. He says that the types of awrah are four. He says, awrat al-rajul mutlaqa wal-ammati fi salah. He says the first of these types is the awrah or the part that needs to be covered or not looked at in general. When we talk about the man overall in general, right? And when I say it not needs not to be looked at or isn't permissibly be looked at in general, I mean in most situations. There are some people that can see, but the general ruling is these are areas of the body that need to be covered. Right? And when I say for the man in general, I mean in all of his different situations. Because as you know, the situation of a woman is different depending on her situation and who she's around. Right? The situation of the odor of the woman is different. It varies depending on who she's around and what her situation is. Is she a free woman? Is she a slave woman? Things along these sorts. All right. So again, he says the first of these types of aura that we're going to talk about is the aura of a woman. I'm sorry, a man in general, meaning in all of his different situations. He says, and the Emma is a slave girl or a slave woman. Type and Emma is a woman, but she's a slave. Type. And here he's not talking about the Emma all the way around the board all the time, things along these sorts. He specifically mentions here the Emma in terms of her salah. The Emma in terms of her salah, her prayer. He says, Ma bayna surati wa rukbati. He says, so her aura, or his aura in general, and her aura during the salat, we're talking specifically about the slave woman here. He says that it is that which is between the surah, the surah, the belly button, and the knees. Right? That which is between the belly button and the knees. It's obligatory on her and him in this situation to make sure that this is covered. Now, does that mean that you should be out and about just, no. We have to understand that just because certain things may not be, how can I put it? Just because we say that it's obligatory on us to keep this area covered does not mean that I should be walking around the streets with everything else uncovered. There are still regulations on Islam on how we're supposed to be dressing and things along these sorts. But we're talking about those areas that is completely and totally impermissible to be because there's adab in Islam. There's mannerisms in Islam. There are certain things, as Muslims we're supposed to practice a certain level of hayat or a certain level of hayat, of shyness, of modesty. Right? So we don't just say, okay, well, individuals can just, as long as that part of their body is covered, khalas, do as you please. All right. Um, but this part is obligatory under no circumstances. Should an individual, I mean, obviously, unless there are extreme, extreme, extreme circumstances, but under no circumstances should they be out and about or this Emma be out um, in a situation where she's uh, making a salah in less than that, or he shouldn't be out and about in less than that, in any less than that. I'll say like that. He shouldn't be out in any less than that. So this is the first one. And what the Sheikh he says about this, he says عورة الرجل واجب أن سترها في كل حال من الأحوال. Well, okay, I just mentioned that. حضور النساء أي في الصلاة وخارجها بحضور السنة الأجنبية وعدمها. Okay, that's another thing that we need to understand. A lot of times people think, okay, well, if like for a man, that if there are no women around or there are no people around that's haram for them to see that individual, that he could just walk around however he want. And the same for women. You just walk around however they want. No, that's not the situation. He said, like he says here, he says, عورة الرجل واجب عورة الرجل واجب عليه سترها في كل حال من الأحوال أي في الصلاة وخارجها بحضور النساء الأجنبيات وعدمه. He says that, that the aura of the rajul or the part that needs to be covered from the man, he says that it's obligatory on him to keep it covered in all situations. He said whether he's in the salah or not in the salah. He says, or if there are women around that he could possibly marry or not. Right? He says in the Amma, he says, is wajib alayha satruha li sahhat salat. He says, and as far as the Emma, as we just mentioned, that it is a situation where it's obligatory on her to keep that area of her body covered at the very least if she's in the situation of the salah. If she's in the situation of the salah. And then he mentions something else here. He says, وَلَوْ صَلَّتِ الْأَمَّةِ بِحَضْرَةِ الْأَجْنَبِيِّ وَاقْتَصَرَ عَلَى سَتْرِ. He says, if the Emma, if she prays and she only covers that area of her body, the area that we just mentioned, from the belly button to the knees, then her salah is sahih. He says, أثمت بكشف ما حرم النذر على الأجنبي. He says, وأثمت بكشف ما حرم نذره على الأجنبي. He says, and she's sinned for uncovering those parts of her body that somebody that's ajnabi, somebody that is marrying material, I should say, can see. Or they're not supposed to see, I'm sorry. So the salah is sahih, all right? But, but she's sinning because that person is ajnabi. There's not anything that keeps them from being able to marry at all. I don't mean temporarily. I mean, at all, temporarily or permanently. There's nothing there to keep them from being able to be married. I'm sorry, permanently, because the temporary part is they're only not marriable if or when the situation comes up that hedges or that barrier exists. Once that barrier is gone, listen, it's whatever. All right. So understand that. So he says, so if she prays around that person like that, the salah is sahih because she had her awrah covered. But she was exposing parts of her body that she wasn't supposed to be exposing, so she's sinning for that part of it. I hope that's understood. Like I said, just because it doesn't have to be covered doesn't mean it should be shown. Do you understand what I mean? Um, because not everybody. Now, understand what I said here. Understand what I said here. Because we said it's somebody that has to be married, that can be married to her. Somebody that's not ajnabi to her. They can see those parts of her body. Type. Somebody that's not ajnabi to her, that can see those parts of her body, then she's not sinning for showing them. If that makes sense. And she's not sinning for showing them. But those individuals who can't see different parts of her body, then these are the individuals that she sins for. Not everybody that sees that. All right. And I hope that's clear, inshallah. If you have any questions, just leave it put it in the Discord in the room for the Sisters Fiqh level 2. All right. Um, what else does he say? He says, يجب ستر ما لا يتم به الواجب فهو جزء من الصورة. Okay. Another thing he mentions is when we talk about from the belly button to the knees. All right. He's talking about the area in between those two areas. He's talking about the area in between the belly button and the knees. He's not necessarily in the madhab speaking about the belly button and the knees. But he does mention that principle that we always talk about. ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. That which an obligation can't be completed except by way of it, then it too is an obligation. Right? The only way that you can know that you've covered the whole of that area is to cover a little bit above it and a little bit below it. Because it's a possibility that if you just go straight to right where you say you see your belly button to be and right where you see your knees to be, that you can miss part of it. You have to make sure that it's done. The only way you can make sure that it's done is to go a little above and a little below. So part of the belly button has to be covered and part of the knees has to be covered. And I think that's pretty clear for the most part, inshallah. If not, like I said, let me know, inshallah, and we can stop and go over that. So he says, number 2, he says, Awrat al-Hurra fi salah. He says, and the awrah, or the part of the hurra. The hurra, as you all know, is the free woman. She's not a slave. All right. He said, the awrah of the woman in the salah. Make sure you not erase. What's the word? Underline that. Fi salah, in the salah. He says, jami'ul badn. He says, is the whole of her body. Is the whole of her body. ما سوى الوجه والكفين. He says everything except the wajh, her face, and the kafain, and the two hands. Everything but the face and the two hands. And before y'all ask questions, let me finish this section, And then if you have any questions, just to make sure that I'm not going to answer your questions. All right, just this little piece right here. All right. Um, so he said, so the horror, the free woman in the salah, she has to keep the whole of her body covered except her face and her hands. All right. And this includes the feet and all the rest of it. You know what I mean? So he says واجب على ستر السهل من جميع بدنها حتى باطن القدم. He mentions here the feet. He said even like the underside of her feet, she needs to make sure that the whole of her body is covered. Right? So, if your overgarment's not going to cover your feet during the whole of the salah, not just where you're standing. But if it doesn't, then you should have some socks on or something along those lines. He says, إلا وجه الكفين. He says, except the face and the hands. He says, ظهرهما وبطنهما إلى القواعدهما. He says it's the front and the back of the hands, all the way up to the two wrists. Um, he says, أي القوعين فيجب عليها سترهما. He says, but the wrist, he says, all the way up to the wrist. Now, this is really important. This is an important issue. Your hands and your wrists are two different things. Even though they're connected, they're two different things. So to say that your hands can be out doesn't mean that your wrist can be out. For those of you who wear the overgarments that um, are real loose and during the salah they fall back to down here and all the rest of that, the wrists need to be covered. All right, the wrists need to be covered. So if you wear those little sleeve things up under your overgarment, that's one thing. But your skin shouldn't be showing, right? From your wrist, even in this area right here. Because this is my wrist. This is my arm. Right? So he says that the awrah and the salah, and this is important because we're talking about the salah. And we're talking about the acceptability of the salah. So you don't want to be praying like that and have your salah not acceptable because you didn't have your awrah covered. So it's important to be mindful of that. Okay. Um, so مثلها ذكر فمثل ما ذكر. Okay, he says, and like that is the khunta, the hermaphrodite. طيب. And like that is the hermaphrodite. طيب. Meaning the hermaphrodite has the same, or she has the same aura as the hermaphrodite. Okay. But he says the hermaphrodite that is hur, the what's that word? Not a slave hermaphrodite, the free hermaphrodite. All right. Now, if you all have any questions now about that issue of the aura of the woman, the aura of the woman while she's um while she's praying, inshallah, you can ask now. I just know that a lot of what I just said probably answered some of the questions or the questions I normally get in this area. But if any of y'all have any questions or need me to repeat it, just let me know, inshallah. And number three, he says, عورة الحرة والأمة عند الأجانب. طيب. He says the aura of the hurra. And again, the hurra is who? It's the free woman. طيب. And the amma عند الأجانب. And the amma, the slave girl. These are the two words together, hurra and amma. Hurra is the free woman and the amma is the slave girl. He says, the aura of both of them when it comes to the ajanib, someone that she's not prevented from marrying, whether it be now or later, whether it be now or later. Right? Just like an example I always give, because it makes it more clear. Because it makes it more clear. Why I say now or later. If a man has, let's say he has four wives, he can't marry any more women. Just because he can't marry those other women doesn't mean that they're not ajnabi to him. Because they're not, he can't marry them temporarily. But if something happened, if one of his wives passed, or they got a divorce, or they got a khula, or whatever the situation is, then those other wives become permissible for him to marry. So they're not completely and totally ajnabi to him. Do you understand? This is why I keep saying, for those of you who wonder why I keep saying can't marry temporarily, this is the type of situation I mean. There's a difference between an individual you could never marry, like a man can never marry his mother, or a woman can never marry her father. That's what we mean when we say a person uh, is not ajnabi to her. He's a mahram to her. Right? So, um, where was I? He says, so the awrah of the hurra and the emma, if there are a janib around. Now we're talking about inside and outside of the salah. We're talking about inside and outside of the salah. He says it's jami' al-badan. He says it's the whole of their bodies. The whole of their bodies. طيب? The whole of their bodies. He says, وهذا الأقسام من أقسام العورة أو الظهور وأجنبي. He says uh, yes, if the man is around that is ajnabi to them. He says, and somebody that's ajnabi, for in case you wanted to write this down, or someone that is haram on them, but for different reasons. For the reason of a nasab, or rida, or musahara, meaning that they're blood relatives. They're blood relatives like that. Right? Or a rida is from wet nursing. They have like a relationship or a family relationship because of blood nursing, not because of, I'm sorry, because of wet nursing, not because of blood. And al-musahara is because of, what would you call that? Like being an in-law, like being an in-law. Right? He says, if a person it doesn't have one of those, isn't haram on that other person because of one of these reasons, then they fall into people that she has to keep covered in front of. He says, and this is the Jami' al-Badan. He says, this is all of the body. He says, حتى الوجه والكفين. He says, even the face and the kafain. He says, and the two hands. He says, فَيَجِبُ عَلَيْهِمَا سَتْرُهُ. He says, so both of these types of women in that situation, they have to keep it covered. وَيُحْرَمْ عَلَيْهِمْ another statement. He says, and it's impermissible for these men to look at these part that at her body. It's impermissible. He says, ومثله ومثل ما ذكر الخنثى لو رقيق. And here again, he mentions the situation of the khunta, the hermaphrodite, the hermaphrodite. Type. He says, and even if it's something that if it's not like a really thick covering, it has to be, but it has to be covering. It has to be a covering. He says, وأن الرابع من أقسام الأورة. He says in the fourth of these types of awrah, he says the awrah al-hurra wal-amma. He says in the fourth of these is the awrah of the hurra and the amma. He says in the rijal al-muharram wa in the nisa. I just explained that. We're talking about the when it comes to the men that they can't marry under any circumstances and other women. He says وكذا في الخلوة عند المملوك الحرة تعفيف وهي عفيفة وهي ما بين السر والركبة. He says he says وكذا في الخلوة وإن okay, yeah, when they're alone. He said even when they're alone and like you may be alone with somebody that is from your maharam or other women, alone like in a room or something along these sorts. He says وعند المملوك الحرة. He says and she says and this is even including your slave girls, a woman around slave girls that are afifa, that are they're how do you say afifa? They're not promiscuous women. They're not promiscuous women. Right? He says he says that the awrah is that which is between the belly button and the knees. He says ويحرم على الحرة أن تكشف ما لا يبدو عند محنة بحضور الامرأة. He says and pay attention to this. Now, when he says the nisa, he's talking about the Muslim women. He's talking about the Muslim women. He says, ويحرم على الحرة أن تكشف ما لا يبدو عند المهنة بحضرة الامرأة كافرة. He says, and the woman, she is not allowed to show if a non-believing woman comes around. That which doesn't normally show, like if she's in her work clothes, like where she's just moving around. You understand what I'm saying? She's not allowed to show because, there's a lot of dangers behind that. There's a lot of dangers behind it. But she says a disbelieving woman, they can't necessarily, that the order is bigger than it is for a Muslim woman or a Muslim slave girl. Only that which, in terms of the non-Muslim woman. And if she's around and if you're around her, then you can only show to her that which would be worn at work, like if you were at work, that type of thing. You know, it's not, you know, all of these like, let me see. Yeah, you've all lived here in Egypt. You've all lived here in Egypt. So you know that there have over the years been things where the sisters get together and you know, they people just wear what they want to wear and this, that, and the other, and they get a little bit more comfortable around one another. You can't do that around non-Muslims. You can't do that around non-Muslims. You know, you still have to have a certain amount of shyness where you can't, you know, just, I'm just using the phrase. I don't mean literally, just completely let your hair down like you can do around the Muslim women. And even nowadays, I would tell you it's not something that's really recommended. The way that people do all of the talking and how everybody's always snapping pictures and all the rest of that stuff. It's not really a good situation to put yourself in. And we don't say, okay, well, I didn't mean it. If it gets out, then it's on them. No, it's upon you not to put yourself in bad situations, in those types of situations.